Much earlier than that. It was about 1999, 2000, thereabouts, when we started doing outsourced technical support before India. I got into the outsourced business before India got into it. And I was outsourcing tech support to internet companies, and so I had trade shows and I would do booths all over. And I was in New York City, and we did a very simple booth, relatively speaking. I mean, it still cost us 20 grand to be there. But our booth was nothing. I mean, we would be these little, handful of us in a with some tables, and we'd be next to these, $100,000 booths with all these, incredible designs and glossy brochures, and we call them booth babes, but they had beautiful women, talking up their product. And the trouble was, I had no clue what their product was. I mean, I'd be looking at their brochures and saying, what does this thing do? And I was in the business. And I quickly realized that they were just funded by Wall Street, and most of the stuff did nothing. I mean, it was literally vaporware. I mean, they had hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend, and they had to show their investors they were spending it. But at the end of the day, I mean, here it is. We're schlepping all our stuff in on carts and handling our monitors and doing all that stuff. They had crews to do all that, and they were union. So, I mean, they had union crews setting up union setups, and literally the people who were pitching the product would disconnect their microphones, pick up their briefcase, and leave. And everyone else had to pick up all the stuff after them. And I thought, this is weird. They left hundreds of thousands of dollars of stuff behind. They just would leave these brochures, and they would say, what do you want us to do with them? And say, throw them out. And there were just trash cans full of this stuff. So I guess that was an indicator to me that we were in a bubble. And I would have to say that I don't know how many of us saw the housing bubble, but when you're in it and everyone's flipping houses, I mean, people were telling me in 2005, you ought to buy another 2 or 3 houses just so you can turn them over. Everyone's buying houses now, and I guess that should have told me something. So what we have today is a new reality. And we are living in a new reality. And I want to share with you a slogan that was just I'm in a group called Humboldt Village, and they came up with this, she was quipping, just a little quip, and I said, I want to make a t-shirt out of this. And I love the saying, and it's, less is the new more. And I thought I said, that is a sign of our times. Less is the new more. Get used to it. So we are in the new less is more times. And to get started, I have with me somebody I met I went to transition training for Transition Town trainers back in February, and I met this gentleman there. I was impressed with what he was talking about, and I've heard this story on NPR radio, and I've been listening to it on the web. And we're talking about slow money. And a lot of people say, what's slow money? Well, I have the guy here to tell you all about it. Marco Vangelisti is a expert in finance, and he's worked with the big guys investing with major funds. But Marco is going to talk to you about slow money. Marco.
Well, thank you, Larry. I hope you can all hear me. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you, Larry, for inviting me and putting together such a wonderful conference. And I didn't prepare the talk because I figured we are in resilience adaptation mode. So I want to see what are the vibes, what are we talking about, and I just finished putting together what I'm going to talk about this morning. So it's not going to be super polished. There's going to be no PowerPoint stuff, but I hope it would be engaging to you. So I just want to say that I'm going to talk about the economy. So I'm going to give you a bigger picture than just slow money, but I want to talk about the economy, slow money, resilience, and relocalizing everything with the focus on what can the person in your seat do starting on Monday. Okay, so first of all, as Larry said, I worked in finance for a long time. A part of my bio got lopped off, which was the fact that I was an artist full-time for 6 years, working at the intersection of art and ecology. So, I'm not just one side of the brain. And 3 years ago, I left the finance industry because I realized I did not want to be part of that system anymore. And I canceled all my subscription. I used to teach chartered financial analysts. I discontinued that. And I thought I will never get involved in finance again until I met Woody Tash and read his book. And I see myself being engaged for the last 3 years in something that is called the Great Turning. And some of you might know what the Great Turning is. And that is basically Joanna Macy's work, the shift in society and all its institutions that is required to bring about a environmentally sustainable, socially just, and spiritually fulfilling human presence on this planet. That's what I've been working on for the last 3 years, and it has been tremendous amount of fun. So I'm so glad that we saw the story of change immediately after McKibben, because I have a hard time dealing with an audience that is on the floor in a fetal position with a thumb stuck in their mouth, whimpering quietly. And so I'm glad that that kind of revived you a little bit. And I think the message I want to get across is, yes, the job is big, but we don't need everybody. The people in this room are enough to change the reality on the ground in this region. And it's so much fun, you can't even imagine. I mean, the last 3 years for me have been the most enjoyable of my life. So let me talk about something that I picked up from the wonderful talk by Kathleen Lee yesterday. How many of you were here for the talk? Yes. Was that a great, amazing talk? But yes. But there was one thing that kind of struck me, and that was the talk about, there isn't enough money. It's like this county, yes, we could do preparedness and so on, but we don't have enough money. And you hear this all over the place, right? You say, the state has to cut services and education because we don't have any money. And the government doesn't have any money, right? We're in a crisis, we don't have any money. That is false. I don't know if it is true for this county, but that would be very sad if it were true for this county. But I know for sure it's not true for the state of California, and is not true for the United States. In fact, I'm going to say something that will probably struck you as somewhat strange. We don't have an economic problem in this country. And you might say, Marco, you've been smoking something, right? Yeah. Unemployment at 8.2%, the foreclosure crisis. If you look at something called the U6 that the Department of Labor maintains, which is the broader pool of the definition of unemployment, including the discouraged workers and the part-timers that want to be full-timers, we're talking about 16%. How can you say that we don't have an economic problem in this country? Right? Yes. Well, we don't have an economic problem because last year, if you look at the GDP that was created by this nation, that corresponds to $196,000 per family of 4. That are the numbers. So let me ask you a question. Let's imagine as a society we decide to work 20 hours a week and cut our GDP in half. By the way, a lot of species around the country in the environment would say, thank you very much. That is very nice, thank you. Let me ask you, could you support a family of 4 with $100,000? Raise your hand, could you? Right? Yeah. So we don't have an economic problem. We have a distribution problem. And that's very important to understand. This economy is fantastically productive. We are a very rich nation. The problem is 1% of the population right now owns 50% of the wealth of this country. 400 people who could fit in this room owes more wealth than the bottom 160 million of us. Let that sink in. The people that could fit in this room own more wealth than the bottom 60% of our population. Yes. So there is money. In fact, corporations are sitting on the largest stash of cash in the history of humanity. It's in excess of $1 trillion. And the corporations are not investing it because they're rational. Why would they invest and expand capacity and production when nobody is there to buy the stuff? Right? So that's something that you need to keep in mind. We don't have an economic problem, we have a distribution problem. Now, I can't get into the details of how we got here, but let me just mention how we dealt with this problem the last time we had a big crisis. And that was during the Great Depression. And it's true that we had different numbers for unemployment, but we had 25% of unemployment at the time. And when you have unemployment, you have people that are not paying income tax. You have the economy is not generating revenues for the government. The government has to spend more. So if we have a problem now with not there being enough money, it was a much bigger problem then, right? And that was true for the state, that was true for the government. But what did we do? FDR said, we're going to create Social Security. Wildly expensive program. It said if you're 65 years of age or older, the government will write you a check every month for the rest of your life. Wildly expensive program. But that was not enough. He said if you are unemployed, we're going to create unemployment benefits. Did not exist before. Were created in the throes of the Depression. And that means if you're unemployed, not because of your fault, and you're looking for a job and you cannot find a job, we're going to write you a check for the next 2 or 3 years until you find it. Wildly expensive program by the government. But that was not enough. There was even a bigger program that the government launched. And FDR at a certain point went on the radio, I think it was 1933 or 34, and he said, if the private sector is not willing or able to hire people that want to work, there is no other solution but for the government to hire them. And he created a job program where 12.5 million new jobs were created. Fixing the parks, building the Golden Gate Bridge and the Bay Bridge and the interstate and so on. Where was the money? Where was the money?
They printed it.
No, they didn't print it. They didn't print it. He went to his friends, FDR, rich dudes, and says, okay, here's the situation. We have a lot of unhappy people. They're organizing in terms of unions. There is a strong socialist party. There is a strong communist party. And they have been talking about overthrowing the system that we have called capitalism. So there are two possibilities. Either you give me a lot of money to pay for all the services, or these guys are going to give you a much worse deal. And actually, he proposed the first proposal that he gave to Congress in 1941 for the maximum tax rate. Do you know how much that was? Above $25,000, the tax rate would be 100%. He basically said we should have a maximum income in the United States. Maximum income. Nobody can make more than $25,000. Period. We'll take everything else. And of course the Congress balked, and then they discussed, and they negotiated, and came up with a compromise. 94%. That's where the money was found. Now the interesting thing is that by providing that support to the people at the bottom, with unemployment benefits, with Social Security, and with jobs, that created the biggest economic boom that we have seen in the 50s and 60s. Because companies could expand and invest because there was somebody to buy the stuff that they were going to produce. We are now taking the very opposite tack. What are we doing now? Cutting services, cutting Social Security, cutting unemployment benefits, cutting education, cutting support to the states and so on. The wrong strategy. Now, obviously, why can they get away with that? Is because we don't have a very strong popular uprising and organizing saying we need to change the system. And the Occupy movement is the beginning of that, but needs to grow. And what I think I like a lot about the Occupy movement is the fact that they, for the first time, put center stage the economic system as the problem. And actually, if you think about this, this economy has grown by more than twofold in the last 40 years. All the economic benefits of that growth have gone to the top 10% of the population, of the income earners. The average real wage has been stagnating since 1978, when it peaked. And people have basically used three strategies to cope with that. One is more people joining the workforce, especially women. When that strategy ran out of people, they started working longer hours. When that strategy was exhausted, borrowing money. And now the game is over for all these three strategies. So, I mean, we can talk more about the economics. I'm actually developing the economic curriculum for the transition town, and we are testing it down in Santa Cruz. So I don't want to talk more about this, but I believe that we need to understand how the economic system works and how the financial system works so that we know how to intervene and change the system. So, but let me talk now about slow money. Slow money is coming out of a recognition that we have some substantial problems with both our food system and with our financial system. And I want to just read, by the way, I have some material here that will be enough for everybody, I think. Here's a copy of an article I wrote and the principles of slow money, and we'll read a couple of them. But when I read this book, I decided I need to be involved in this project, and I have been quite intensely. So let me just read you this paragraph. You wouldn't use a 747 to go to the corner store for a quart of milk. You wouldn't use a backhoe to plant a garlic bulb. You wouldn't use a factory to raise a pig. You wouldn't spray poison on your food. You wouldn't trade fresh food from family farms down the road for irradiated or contaminated or chemically laden or weeks-old food from industrial farms halfway around the world. You wouldn't create financial incentives for farms to become so large that they need GPS technology to apply chemical inputs with quasi-military precision. You wouldn't design a system that gets only 9 cents of every food dollar to the farmer. You wouldn't allow topsoil to wash down the Mississippi River, replete with pesticides and fertilizers residue, creating a dead zone of the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico. You wouldn't use 50 cents calories of petro energy to produce 1 calorie of food energy. No one ever sat down and designed such a system. Yet it is precisely such a technology-heavy, extractive, intermediation-laden food system that we now need to remediate and reform. This is the system that has evolved in the wake of global capital markets and the investors who use them, much as industrial farmers use their land, as a medium into which to pour capital in order to harvest maximum yield. And that is at the core of the recognition that is behind the slow money movement. And that is that the world we live in now has been shaped by the investments we made in the last 10 to 20 years. And yes, having in our mutual funds holdings of Monsanto and GM and McDonald's and Tyson Chicken provided great returns. And we might have been delighted to see our statement and to see the improve in our returns. But at the same time, those investments have created a world where good food that is healthy costs 20-30% more than the food that makes us sick. And so it is now incumbent upon us to look at the assets that we own and say, what is my money doing at night while asleep? Who's using it, right? Who is making it to good use or bad use? Do we really know? Do you know where your money is sleeping at night? Right? And that is the challenge for us, is to recognize that the investments we make now and who controls the capital shapes the world we're going to be living in. And the results we see now in terms of global warming, in terms of the politicians being now at the service of large corporations and so on, it's all the results of the investment. Where was the capital? And yes, we don't own all the capital, but we own some. And it is up to us that wants to see a different world to make sure that the resources, the financial resources we have, which are actually under our control, are used in such a way that don't create the world that we don't want to live in, right? So that's what Slow Money is really all about, is hosting this conversation about what is the problem that we are facing financially, economically, in terms of the food system, and how can we bring some of that money, some, maybe not all, but let's start with a little bit, and taking it from Wall Street and put it to work where we live by supporting food and farming enterprises in the food chain that provides us with food. That's the project of Slow Money. And in fact, I'm going to read a couple of the principles, and I made a copy of this, and it's there, or you can find it on the website at slowmoney.org. In order to enhance food security, food safety, and food access, improve nutrition and health, promote cultural, ecological, and economic diversity, and accelerate the transition from an economy